Hey guys, this is Neil. Welcome back to my channel. Today I will be painting alliums or onion flowers. This is super simple and I love the color combination for this. The painting technique is very simple, so I'm going to create different color variations too. So like any other tutorial, I will start by drawing out the structure first. This is so easy and very beginner friendly. The main shape is just a circle and a stem. I'm not even going to paint the leaves since this plant usually grows quite tall, and the only thing that you might have to be mindful of is the position of the stem. So if the stem is behind the circle or the flower itself, it will look like the flower is facing you, but if the stem is in front of the flower, it's facing away from you. And another thing to think about is that the stem will always be connected to the mid part of the circle or where the flowers are bunching together. I'm going to show you two ways of painting the texture and form of the flower, and I'm going to show you with pencil first. For the first one, I'm going to do small strokes or sometimes dots to create the texture of the flower when it's in full bloom. So I want to mostly direct the strokes more or less to the center of the circle, but as I'm reaching the barrier, I'm going to direct the strokes to follow the circle. The second way is when it's not in full bloom or when it's looking a bit sparse, and this is quite similar to a dandelion, so I want to make lines first of the small stem facing the center, and then I'm going to do a little bit of the same strokes that we did for the first type, but this time I'm going to make them a bit more sparse. Now I'm going to go over the main colors, which is cobalt violet, mineral violet, ultramarine blue, sap green, and permanent yellow deep. And on top of that, I'm also going to use white gouache. I'm not going to do a separate swatch for the color mixture, but instead I'm just going to apply it straight to the painting. This is not the final painting though, it's just an example. So to begin with, I'm just going to start with cobalt violet light, and I'm starting at the middle of the flower. This one is for the one in full bloom, and I'm just going to use clean water after that and spread it out towards the edges of the flower, keeping in mind the short strokes that we did with pencil. So I want my strokes to be facing the middle, and when we get towards the edges, I'm going to redirect the strokes so it follows the circular shape. I'm also leaving out a fair amount of white negative space. This way I will still have texture instead of just having a flat wash. For the paint, sometimes I switch with clean water so I get a nice gradation of color instead of just one flat color. I forgot to also mention, don't go too overboard with water. You want everything to just be slightly damp when you build up the layers, but not puddling wet. So for the second layer, I'm going to just use mineral violet, and I'm going to apply this in a thicker consistency than the first layer, but I'm applying it the same way, only at the bottom part of the flower to give a bit of dimension. Notice that even if the consistency is different, the second layer still blends with the first layer. That's because the first layer is still slightly damp instead of it being completely dry or puddling wet. So for the third layer, I'm going to mix mineral violet with ultramarine, and I'm going to dot this purple around the darker areas of the flower, and I want it to be well blended with the initial layers without the color itself taking over the previous two colors. So try to not apply too much of the darker purple. I'm also going to add tiny dots towards the top for a little bit of extra detail. Last but not least, I'm going to finish off with the stem. I'm just going to stick with this brush because this flower has a fairly thick stem. And for the color, I'm going to use a mixture of sap green and permanent yellow deep. Moving along to the second type of flower, I'm going to use the same color mix as the stem, and I'm going to use the tip of my brush to paint long lines towards the center, and where there is still space on the outside, I'm just going to add more lines. Not all of the lines have to touch the center. You want that to be the basic direction, just a little bit like fireworks. I'm just going to paint strokes to represent the flower, and for this I mixed in white gouache, sap green, and permanent yellow deep, and then I'm going to apply them in a different direction where we were pointing at the center. Now we're following the curvature of the circle, and I'm going to apply a little bit, not as much as what we did in the first type, because we want this one to be a bit more sparse so you can still see the center of the flower. And just like the first one, I'm going to finish off with the stem. I'm going to do another one of the second type, but this time I'm going to add more permanent yellow deep into the mixture, and this way it looks like there are different stages of growth, where this one is a bit more mature compared to the one we initially paint, which still looks younger since the flowers are a bit more green. So these are the two types we're going to be painting. The first one in full bloom, and the second one with the two color variation, one being more mature and one being a bit younger. For the final painting, I'm just going to go straight on, but if you're still a bit uncomfortable with painting straight on paper, you can draw a thumbnail sketch so you have a bit of reference when you're painting. You can paint with any composition that you would like to, but you may also paint along to this. I'm going to paint all of the types using the same steps that I previously did, and then once we get to that stage where the flowers are all painted, I'm going to get back to you and talk about the final elements, which I added to give a bit more depth and character to the painting. Once I'm done with painting the last stem, I'm going to add purple into the sap green mix to create a darker tone of green, and I'm going to apply it to where the stem is meeting the flower to give it a bit more depth. Okay, so once you've painted all the flowers, I want to bring them forward a bit. So I'm going to create more flowers at the back, but this time I'm only going to use 1 or 2 layers instead of adding so much detail, and I'm painting this fairly loosely. My brush at this point was also still a bit dirty from the previous color I used, but I didn't worry so much because I actually want to create a different tone of purple, and I'm just using the cobalt violet here. I'm applying it at a very thin consistency, and the contrast of detail will bring forward the flowers at the foreground. I'm going to paint a couple with this color, and I like how this one has a slightly pinkish tone and it complements all the other flowers. At this point, I thought I was finished, so I moved along to painting some dots for some added detail. It kind of looked like some flowers are being blown by a slight breeze, and I really like that look. But as I was looking at the final composition again, I didn't like how there was a gap at the center, so I proceeded to paint more flowers for a tighter bouquet. So I did the same thing using the same colors, but later I found out that it looked like I just blended 2 flowers together, so I ended up adding some ultramarine blue to create a different type of purple, and this time a bit deeper so it looks further away at the back. I'm also going to paint 2 of these, so there's 2 of each type, and then it's complete. This is probably one of my favorite flowers that I've painted so far, and it's so simple too. I hope you guys enjoyed this as much as I did painting them. If you give this a go, please don't forget to show me and tag me on Instagram. I'll leave you all the links at the description box below. Thank you so much for watching till the end, and I'll see you at the next one. Bye!